With us now with a ton of politics to work our way through. Welcome and thank you to Dale Husband and Ben Thomas. Kia ora korua.
Tēnā koe, Catherine. Hey Ben, kia ora.
Dale is a long-time broadcaster and Radio Waatea presenter, hosting a current affairs program. Ben is a former National Government Press Secretary, a columnist and a director of public affairs firm Capital. So the changes being made to enrolments, the electoral changes announced by the Minister last week, let's just recap. There's already been an earlier decision about prisoner voting, which was a no. There's a subsequent move to roll back a change from 2020 that means that people could enrol or change their enrolment details on election day. Not only is the government rolling that back, but it's proposing to make it so that you can't change your details or enrol for the entire advance voting period, something like 12 to 13 days before the election. The latest is the Attorney General's report on whether this breaches of Bill of Rights Act, finding indeed that it does. That happens a lot, Ben, but it's a fairly sort of forthright point that is made in the Attorney General's reporting here, essentially saying that perhaps 100,000 people plus may be directly or indirectly disenfranchised by the change.
Yeah, and so these Section 7 reports are tendered by the Attorney General whenever they find that there is an inconsistency with the Bill of Rights, which either means that there's a breach of the rights in the Bill of Rights, or that cannot be justified in what they say, reasonably subject to reasonable limits in a free and democratic society or something like that. And they do crop up fairly often, usually for sort of little administrative things where you say that, people who've been institutionalised can't serve on the board of, this trust or something that you're amending the laws about or something like that.
A lot of legislation has breaches of the Bill of Rights and just proceeds, let's face it.
Well, yeah, I think in a political sense, where you most often see it, particularly with Conservative governments, is on display in this bill as well, which is voting rights for prisoners. You see it in things like gang patch legislation, where the government actually almost makes a political virtue of breaching the Bill of Rights Act. And they say, well, the implicit message is we are not here to uphold the Bill of gang members' rights. We don't care about gang members' rights. We care about everyday people. Now, I think politically that becomes a much more difficult argument to make when you're basically talking about we don't care about the rights of people who are a little disorganised and don't remember to respond to the letters from the Electoral Commission.
Or new voters.
Or
and so
young,
forth.
or who are new voters.
Because let me quote again from the finding from the Attorney General today. Young people and areas with larger Māori, Asian and Pasifika likely to be the worst affected. She also notes, this is my colleague in the press gallery's reporting, she also notes there were other options the government could have implemented, such as reverting to a deadline of the day before an election or a deadline of 3, 5 or 7 days before. That's a little stronger than I've seen in the past in some of these things.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think really the point is it is a pretty clear breach. It's explained why, based on sort of Australian jurisprudence, that what matters is not setting an objective baseline. For instance, the Australians have a 25-day cut-off period, but what matters is the sort of the change and the magnitude or intensity of the change kind of suddenly, given what people are expect about, being able to enrol on the day. A lot of people do not think about elections before they've started. Political parties know that. That's why the advertising spend and the campaign goes into absolute overdrive in those final 2 weeks, because they realise that a lot of people have not been paying attention and they need to get people on board. And that's why you see 110,000 special votes on the last day, on election day. And I think that if you were going to do something of this magnitude, you would certainly want to consult, if not widely across Parliament, certainly with the Labour Party, the largest opposition party. And I think the government has really left itself open to charges of bad faith here, essentially.
A final point this from the Attorney General's report again on the breach of the Bill of Rights Act. Section 12 is not an absolute right. However, it is plain on the basis of prior Attorney General reports to the House, New Zealand Authority, Comparative Authority and International Authority that the blanket disenfranchisement of prisoners of the sort proposed in the bill cannot be justified. So talking about the 100,000 who'd be affected by the change of when you can enrol or change your enrolment, but also the blanket disenfranchisement of prisoners. Dale, come in please with your views on what was announced last week, proposed.
Well, I'm with you too, Ben. This is an affront really, and we're trying to encourage more of our young people in this country to have political interest, yet at the very same time slapping them on the hand and calling them dropkicks for not having enrolled. I can understand why politicians, that's all they think about, but for Joe Public, they're out and about just trying to put a quid together to pay their mortgage or pay their rent. So, hundreds of thousands of people utilise the facility to get in there on the day and make their feelings known politically. And this is absolutely vital. From a Māori perspective, and you mentioned Pacifica and Asian, we have a youthful population, as I say, distracted from a lot of the to and fro of politics and campaigning. So again, this is just another bully boy example that we're seeing from this coalition government. And they talk about wanting to get the result faster. Look, a little old lady in a pink cardigan could count up those special votes faster than the system we have in place, which is so antiquated. And it certainly isn't those who vote on the day that are causing the delays to find out who's going to govern. It's the coalition arrangements that need to go post-election. So just another example of trying to sideline people's right to have their say. The Attorney General says it's not on, but yet they'll steamroll through and continue just as they have, but at their own peril, because people are watching, and it's important that everyone gets the chance to vote. We're always saying get out and have a go in the democratic process. We don't push people to vote in any particular way, but it's the only game in town, so when it comes to voting, you want to get more people in rather than less.
Very interestingly, it was the New Zealand Herald report that refers to this fact. I haven't got back to the very original source, but it's in the Herald's editorial at the weekend. Close to half of Māori voters aged 18 and 19 enrolled or updated their details during the advanced voting period in 2023. And this is the thing, it's not just on the day. What's proposed is that entire advanced voting period. Ben, you're making the point, that's when the thing is really ramping up. The other interesting thing that I found is that there is a positive change out of this for sure in terms of productivity or streamlining, in that what happens now, as I understand it, is if another government agency finds out you've got a change of address, might be Ministry of Social Development, might be the, Inland Revenue, whomever, they can advise the Electoral Commission, but there still has to be this, we post you a form to say update your address. What's proposed now is that could lead to an automatic updating of where you are on your electoral roll. Now, that's a fair chunk of what can happen last minute, can't it, and cause special votes. You're simply moved out of your electorate and you've got to cast a special vote. So it's kind of, could they have done some of it, Ben, without going as far as they've gone?
Well, that's what I would have thought, and the Attorney General's report makes reference to that. It says a lot of the people who would be directly affected by this change, as in they just simply would be unable to register. That's been ameliorated by other provisions.
Look, if you're moving flats all the time or moving house all the time, this could be your address could be automatically updated. That would surely save a fair chunk of what ends up being special votes.
Yeah, and that would be ideal. But look, then again, you've got room for slippage where people might think, well, look, it'll just automatically update, and then you turn up on the day.
Yeah.
And so there are always, these sorts of wrinkles that show up. Like, I'm always casting special votes because I can't remember which electorate I'm enrolled in. And so, people like me and Michael Wood, who have poor executive function and can't remember to do things, would be disenfranchised forever. But I think the real issue here going forward, so in the short term, you can understand the arguments for, how compelling you think they are is debatable, and against. But in the long term, we know that there is a problem with trust in institutions. We know that there is a problem with people, with lower trust in, government in general.
Democracy in general.
Yeah. I don't think that the idea of sort of trying to gatekeep voting and calling people dropkicks particularly, I thought that was incredibly unhelpful from David Seymour.
Right.
I think it sends all the wrong signals.
Final point, by the way, if you are in the wrong electorate, your party vote is counted, just not your electorate vote, I understand, according to Graham Edgler on Friday. So you're only partly disenfranchised by being a bit off the pace there, Ben. Final thoughts to you, Dale.
They're called special votes because people are special and every vote counts.
Thank you. Let's have a look at other matters. The butter. The Finance Minister meeting the head of Fonterra over the price of butter may have perhaps been raising expectations a tad, some of the commentary goes. And then it's over to you, head of Fonterra, to explain why butter prices are so high. Dale, it gets right to the nub of a bigger problem for the government, doesn't it? Which is we had the food stats out the week or two before, and across everything, across dairy, across meat, across vegetables, prices up. It's part of an ongoing pressure on households and the basic costs.
Very much so. And as you say, it's a case in point. I mean, we're talking about butter. A lot of people find it too expensive anyway, but to have Fonterra come out and say it's completely guided by what they can get as prices on the international market, again, is a reminder of the role that the duopolies in our grocery sector, what role they have here. For Joe Blow, though, you know, the butter argument would hardly be the one with headlines. They're being assaulted by price rises every time you walk through a supermarket checkout. Everything is going up except wages, and we'll get to that later in our corridor as well, Catherine. So it's just another example of the tough times that people are facing, and there's talk of this being a one-term government. The price of butter certainly isn't helping.
Yeah, I think it's certainly true that expectations were probably raised a bit too high. I don't think that this should have been framed as anything other than, you know, that's something that we talk about often. You know, these are things that, you know, we're keeping abreast of.
Post the meeting, it was framed as this is a regular meeting and we'll be talking about butter.
One of the rules of cross-examination in a courtroom is that you should never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. And I would add to that, you probably shouldn't ask a question if you do know the answer, but the answer is we can't really do anything about it and this is just the market at work. And so that sort of, it left the finance minister sort of nowhere to go on that, except to say, well, you know, it was good to get it out in the open. Even before then, I think she had realised that they had maybe raised expectations about what Mike Hoskin called a showdown a little too high. And the previous day had been saying, well, you know, we're talking about the margins, 10 cents or 20 cents, but that really matters to Kiwi shoppers. Yeah. Now, I don't know that it does. I think that part of the problem with, you know, constantly stirring this up on, say, butter prices, milk prices,
meat, vegetables,
is that, you know, it's actually it's the big increases that people are really noticing and feeling. And
rates, electricity.
Yeah. It's not 10 or 20 cents here. It's, you know, it's really big ticket increases.
Dale, interestingly, Fran O'Sullivan, long-time commentator and certainly someone who is an expert on markets and trade in her profession, saying, look, if you really want to make a difference to the price of butter without some kind of intervention that would perhaps be seen as extraordinary, cut GST. And pointed out other jurisdictions do this for specific foods. This was Labour policy. Will they go there again?
Well, they certainly need to reinvestigate it, don't they? And, you know, it felt like something of a PR stunt here that Nicola Willis was meeting with the head of Fonterra, and then they came out with little to say and nothing to spread.
You're in a pithy mood today, Dale. I like it very much.
And it's difficult for the government, right? Because at the same time that they're saying we're going to ask the hard questions and get the answers about these butter prices, about these meat prices, at the same time, every time the government is challenged on the faltering and weakening economy, they say, well, look how well our dairy exports are going. Look how well the primary sector is doing. Our exports are up. It's a boom. So, you know, I don't know how you run this sort of cognitive dissonance of sort of saying the best thing that's happening in the economy right now is high prices for our commodities.
Look, this is feeding into this bigger mood, as we said, the right track, wrong track, heading the wrong way for the incumbent government again. And Dale, this particular measure matters, as do other micro measures that are the same, because they are seen as indicators of mood and potentially of intention. We often used to see before polls, you know, people were sliding in the polls that the right track, wrong track would move first. The government will be worried at the extent and the number of people who feel like things aren't going the right way or are very negative about the economy.
Yeah, and the latest report, I think it's from Talbot, that says, over 70% don't think that the economy is going good, and the majority think that we're heading down the wrong track. When people go to the polls, it's often gut instinct that they have. There'll be data that would back certain aspects of our economy, Catherine, but ultimately it's a feeling you get on the inside. And, talking to colleagues at sports events, when you're picking up the kids from school, this is where decisions are made about which way people will ultimately vote. And sadly, the coalition government has had some time to try, and I know they inherited a difficult situation, but still an air of positivity is needed going forward. Our country could do with dollops of it, but at the moment it just doesn't exist. And so people are voting with their feet, and when asked questions about how you think the government and the economy is tracking, the negativity is almost to be expected. And sadly, I just don't think that the government's pulling the right levers to address that.
It is endeavouring to talk up what is coming down the pipeline, quite literally down the pipeline in terms of the infrastructure pipeline, for example. I think a few things were re-announced, but a big number was put on what is coming, and potentially with positive impact on jobs and positive impact on economies. But Dale, the issue for them is, are they running out of time?
Well, it feels like that. There's a lot of building. People are looking at the immigration stats. We're looking at people using our country as a stepping stone into Australia. We're seeing these one-site multiplex houses getting built left, right and centre. They can't be sold, and we're wondering who they are building them for. And now you've got Chris Bishop talking about the iconic volcanic shafts that exist in Tamaki Makaurau. He's saying he would rather see high-rises than those beautiful maunga that are so treasured by so many. The productive lands south of Tamaki Makaurau are now under threat with more housing and urban development, with more lifestyle properties compromising the beautiful, rich quality of those volcanic soils, which are the food basket for us here in Tamaki, and yet they're under a constant threat. So we're talking about infrastructural investment, but we've got to be very mindful too of our effect on Papatūānuku, the effect on our environment, because New Zealanders treasure this clean, green image that we need to cultivate and we need to maintain. So the threats of infrastructural development without some cultural and environmental input are very, very real, and the ministers responsible need to be very mindful how they step into this space.
Ben, the thing is, they're not yet seeing the hard numbers, are they, out of planned investments? And actually, to Dale's point earlier, some of the policies, things like stopping what Kaingoa is doing in its tracks or pausing what was happening with the Dunedin Hospital bill. We had the construction industry on saying, that's exactly what you don't need, these stop-start things. We end up losing people. They go to Oz and, then we've got to get them back. Is the four-letter word this government has to be most aware of, the word time?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think that everybody, bank economists, the Reserve Bank, Treasury, and indeed the politicians, the cabinet, would have been expecting that the economic recovery would be more underway by now, instead of this constant sort of stalling, stop-starting, trying to, push start it on the side of the road. And we seem to just be sort of assailed by bad news. Certainly there are, external factors that the government can't control. There's the tariff situation coming out of the States. There's an extremely volatile geopolitical environment. And again, to use the old cliche, not the government's fault, but the government's problem. And they are sort of running out of runway in terms of next year. I think that in terms of, say, for instance, the Talbot Mills right track, wrong track statistic, it wasn't actually too bad compared to other recent polls, as far as I can tell. The Freshwater poll in mid-June had them at -14, I think, right track, wrong track. RNZ Reid Research was -9. Taxpayer Union back in May was -13. So I don't think the government's necessarily going backwards, but in terms of this perception, but they are running out of time for things to really start looking up for people. And look, the settings are just about right. I think it's absolutely fair to say that these stalls in construction projects have hurt the economy and have hurt the government as well as that. Chris Bishop, talking about the view shafts and things, I think that guy deserves a lot more credit than he gets as a courageous politician. He's the only politician, the only minister at any rate I've ever heard saying he wants house prices to come
Agreed.
down.
Yeah, okay. He did say that. No one else has gone there. Look,
just to wrap, Catherine, I sort of feel as though there's this barrage of legislation going through. It almost feels like it's panic politics, and they're trying to ram through legislation because they feel that they're on the slippery slope.
All right. Shall we quickly touch, please, on NCEA? The Education Minister, again, is another minister who's been regarded as being effective in terms of getting her program underway. Taking on a big one here that causes a lot of concern for a lot of people, but also taking on, I guess, the sector, so to speak, and one that's in a pay round at the moment, albeit one that's been moved to the Public Service Commission to negotiate. But, Dale, what's your thought on taking on NCEA and how far any reform proposals might go?
Yeah, well, it's a big one, isn't it? But it does deserve some discussion. The merits of NCEA from our perspective on our platform, where we talk about rangatahi and their futures. Many are leaving school without the qualifications that acknowledge their skill sets, and perhaps we need to look at a wider look at the whole education structure. But I think we're all okay with reviewing concepts that were embedded into our education system, just as we did with tomorrow's schools. A time for a re-evaluation as to their merits and how we might improve them. But to throw everything out in one hit probably doesn't serve the interests of our young people well. But it's a timely discussion.
NCEA has been a disaster. It was a response to this idea that people were teaching to the test, and we weren't teaching kids.
Well, it was also that half of
or
15-year-olds failed school cert just by design.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, yeah, and look, you can change that sort of thing by making it mean scores. By raw scores instead of. I don't think School C was moderated in that way. I think sixth form might have been
it was
in the old days.
Yeah.
But NCEA has been a disaster, and this attempt to show what skills children have, it's reduced things to granularity to the point of meaninglessness, where kids are essentially, especially at that level one.
Do you fix it though? Do you fix it, or do you?
You fix it by getting rid of it.
And what do you put up there, Ben?
You just teach kids subjects and then you test them on them, and you don't break everything down into you don't learn to drive by figuring out everything except steering, whereas that's the way you can get through NCEA right now. You can get through NCEA year 12 without any units that count towards literacy for university entrance. I mean, It's ridiculous.
Look, it's a big, bold move, another one by the Minister. Let's just see how far the scope of the review goes. Look, there's more we could talk about, guys, but thank you very much for your time. So appreciated. That is Dale Husband and Ben Thomas.